Hey Internet, what is going on? Welcome to our new show, Diet Explained, where we simply take a topic of the diet and we break it down into a short, sharp and digestible video for everyone to understand. On today's episode of Diet Explained, we are going to discuss the topic of weight loss. Oh boy, everyone's favourite. Now, many people are confused about weight loss and how to actually lose weight, and rightfully so, with all the experts, gurus, looking at you, social media, and miracle diets floating around, each with their own weight loss related information and recommendations. It's easy to see why so many people are confused about which approach to take. When we take a step back and look at the fundamental principles of all these 100% guaranteed to work approaches, check out my client testimonials, totally not photoshopped, get your plan now, only $200, well worth over $5 million, get it now, 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 get it. Sorry about that. Anyways, what was I saying? So when you look at the fundamentals of these diets, they always boil down to one reoccurring principle, which is food restriction, and they typically accomplish food restriction in three main ways. The first being is that they ask you to cut out a certain food, the popular one being that bread is evil, which I'm not sure where they got that from. The second would be that they would ask you to cut out a whole food group or macronutrient group, aka carbs are the devil. And then third would be that they would ask you to restrict the times in the day in which you can actually eat, which in principle would lead to you eating less. Unless you're like me. Hashtag fatties for life. Anyways, food restriction. Why is it so important for weight loss? Well, food is the body's external source of energy, which we refer to as calories. But we also have internal sources of energy too. These include adipose tissue, or better known as fat. We also have glycogen, which glycogen is simply the stored carbohydrate within our muscles and liver. You have protein structures such as lean muscle mass, which we would ideally not want to break down and use for energy. And then you also have nutrients which are circulating within the bloodstream. Our body uses a certain amount of energy to sustain its current state and requires a certain amount of external energy to sustain its current stores of energy. If we do not consume enough energy from food to meet the required amount we need to sustain our present state, we begin to use our internal stores of energy instead. This would result in weight loss. Now, which stores we use will depend on how severe the calorie restriction is, as well as the macronutrient composition of our actual diet. For example, if we consume enough protein, we can offset and or reduce the breakdown of our existing protein stores, shifting more so to the breakdown of fat and carbohydrate. Which stores are used and how much of these stores are used are also influenced by the amount and type of exercise we perform. Evidence would suggest that we preserve more lean muscle mass with high intensity activity like interval training and weight training, etc., as opposed to low intensity long duration activity like running, which I've heard is really not fun, but I've never actually tried it, usually because I'm too busy eating. It is therefore imperative that we aim to consume the adequate nutrients as well as perform the correct exercise, referring to both the type and amount, if our goal is to achieve the most desirable body composition during our weight loss phase. So, you could say that weight loss boils down to the amount of energy we take in versus the amount of energy we expend. The expert miracle guru diets typically work for a short amount of time simply because they restrict food, not for some magical Harry Potter reason. But it's difficult to gauge how much food restriction is actually going on, particularly when you compare one day to the next. In addition, these super cool awesome nothing else works diets do work, up until they don't, and that's when people typically fall off the diet wagon, which possibly results in a huge rebound, aka the seafood eat everything in sight diet, which may then lead to the person being in a worse state than when they originally began their diet. They work up until the point at which they don't, simply because our body readjusts, both in terms of how much energy we need to sustain, because our body has become smaller, and how much energy we're actually expending during the day. Our metabolic rate reduces, as does the total amount of activity we perform in response to calorie restriction. The more severe the calorie restriction, the more the body will fight back in terms of how it readjusts. This tends to be particularly true in women, and that more or less boils down to basically survival of the species reasons. That's why I'd nearly always recommend a more conservative energy deficit or restriction. A conservative approach is also associated with increased sustainability, The body tends to fight back less. It's safer both from a physiological and psychological standpoint, especially when you look at how the severe diets can lead to the development of weight loss related eating disorders. It can also reduce the amount of binging or desire to binge. It can also preserve more lean mass, and it can also better preserve exercise performance. Now, the big question. How the heck do we work out how much we should be eating or how many calories we should be eating for weight loss? Personally, I used the Mifflin-St. John equation, but I also suck at maths, so I actually used a calculator, which, coincidentally, we actually have one of those on our website, which is a really good website and everyone should check it out. That plug. Alternatively, you could do the math, but seriously, who wants to do math? Come on. The calculators will typically give you your total daily energy expenditure, which is your basal metabolic rate or BMR, which is essentially just how much energy you'd expend per day at complete rest, multiplied by an activity factor, which is an estimation of how much activity you would perform during a typical day. These calculators are relatively reliable in terms of their accuracy, but it's best to stick with the number they give you, which would be your maintenance calorie intake, i.e. how much you'd need to maintain your current weight, for a couple of days to a week to see how it affects your weight. Once you've settled on your maintenance amount of calories, simply take away somewhere between 10 to 20% of the amount to get a relatively conservative and sustainable calorie intake which you can stick to that'll result in you losing weight. The amount of energy you need to take in to continue weight loss is a dynamic number, and the number you finish your diet on will, most likely, not be the same number that you started with. You should look to readjust it after weight loss is really slowed or stalled completely, and you can adjust it in 3 ways. You can reduce your calories further, you can increase the total amount of exercise you perform, or you can do a tandem of the two. For example, instead of further reducing calories by 100, you would reduce them by 50 and then do 50 calories more worth of exercise or whatever. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed this episode of Diet Explained. If you did, make sure to like, comment and subscribe, we really appreciate it. You can also follow us on social media on Instagrams as well as the Facebooks, the links will be down below in the description. Eat smarter, train smarter, and I'm sure we'll catch you here for the next episode of Diet Explained.